Today we're going to talk about research, and research is that little thing that we do in order to make sure that we get everything done correctly. Getting it done right is absolutely essential, and how do we know if we've got it right if we don't know which group we're talking to? And so we use research to help determine our groups and figure out how they want the message delivered to them. So let's start with figuring out that research is actually problem solving. And you hear me talk a lot about critical thinking and creative thinking. Well, this is part of the critical thinking. This is problem solving, figuring out how to reach out, how to use the tools that we have at our disposal to actually get the people that we want to either buy our product or attend our event or whatever it is that we're promoting. So research does help us to do a number of things. And by the way, research is not all test tubes. Research, especially for us in StratCom, deals a lot with talking with people. So research helps us to avoid mistakes, and frequently these mistakes can be very costly. If you have identified the wrong market, for example, or if you don't realize that a particular demographic wants their information delivered in one way as opposed to the way you're delivering it. By using research, we can avoid mistakes by finding out not only who our demographic is, but what medium they want to have the message delivered in. We also use it to save time and money. And of course, in this business, time is money, so we want to make sure to make our deliverables available as quickly as we can and to the right audience. We By doing research, it actually gives us insight into clients and the publics we're trying to reach, and that is very, very helpful because we may be thinking one way and the group that we're trying to reach may be thinking slightly different, and that slight difference is enough to make them tune us out. So by conducting research, we can figure out exactly how to reach people. It helps us to make good decisions, and that's something that's incredibly important. If we don't make good decisions about not only packaging our ideas and delivering them in the proper way to the proper people, then we're wasting our time. Again, time is money, time, cost, and so if we wish to keep our jobs, we need to make sure that we're doing it correctly. Making good decisions helps us do that. It also gives us new ideas. I can't count how many times I've been thinking in one way, and in conducting the research, I found, oh gosh, maybe we could go this way or that way. And it gave great new ideas for being able to promote whatever it is I was promoting. Giving you new ideas is always a side benefit, if not a direct benefit, of conducting research. Research helps justify your plans. If you think you really know the organization and you really know the target demographic and your research confirms everything, then that just justifies everything you've plotted out. And that's great. But it also can help shore up and show you where you may be at fault someplace or need to shore things up or need to maybe change something. All in all, it really justifies everything that you're doing. Finally, it helps you connect with communities. We may be, as you are, millennials, and you may not have a family, but your target demographic may be someone who is a family with 3 young children, or a family with teenagers, or elderly. So you need to figure out how to connect with those communities. Research will help you do that. Now, here's something about interesting about research is that organizational research really helps you a lot. It helps you focus. And I know that spinning photo, sorry about that. But it helps you focus because it allows you to go out and conduct focus group surveys, surveys in general. You can do copy and product testing. You can do psychographic studies within the company or organization where you work. Use your organization. Especially if you're working for a large corporation, let's say you're working for a government agency, you can use your own people within the organization to help you as a basic group figure out, are you actually going to be able to reach the folks you need to reach? There are several different research methods that we use. Several of them you see here that you're familiar with and you're going, okay, we have focus groups, we have surveys, we have copy and product testing. Gosh, what else is there? Well, there's actually a lot more. So let's talk about research methods. Research methods are actually, when we talk about things such as focus groups and surveys, those really aren't research methods. Those are actually research products. What are research methods? Well, we have formal research methods. These are very structured. Generally, this means scientific. Generally, if you're talking about formal research, you're talking about in a lab somewhere, and that's very strict protocol. You have to be able to replicate everything and have it come up similar enough to where it's viable. That's not what we do. What we do is more informal. We do more exploratory. We're more sociological. We go out and we watch people. We're observers. We listen to what people say. So when we're talking about the research method that we use in StratComm, it is almost always informal, and it lends itself, the scientists refer to us as squishy because we don't go out and repeat experiments. Because if you repeat the experiment, you're generally doing it with a different group, and that other group is going to have different opinions than your first group. We have our own means and methods. There's also quantitative. Now this is gathering statistical data, and before all of you have a coronary over the fact that I've just said statistical data, yes, math. As a general rule, we don't use, in StratComm, we don't use statistical data that much. Yes, there's some, and we will talk about that, but as a general rule, we don't. Quantitative is more for other groups, not us. We use more qualitative. Qualitative focuses on your individuals or your groups. Doesn't really get into statistical representation. It really doesn't get into hard numbers. It does in terms of pure counting. If you talk about the fact that you've interviewed 687 people, that's a statistical representation. Again, we'll talk more about that later. But you can see it's not like, hey, we're going to go out and we're going to run these numbers and we're going to only do the math. No, most of us are allergic to math, so we focus more on groups. We focus more on the people rather than the numbers. A couple of other things that I want to mention here, other research methods. One is primary. Primary is going out and getting firsthand information. This is where you create a survey or focus groups and go out and gather the information by interviewing people. Then there's secondary, and this is previously gathered. This includes internet, libraries, news sources, books, all those things that you can use to back you up. Please do not confuse these two. Please realize that just getting something off the internet isn't always viable. But primary, if you've conducted your primary research reliably, and again, we'll talk about that later, that you're going to have a much better result than if you just looked online and said, oh, this is what people want. You know, those people might be in Malaysia, or those people might be in Britain. They may not be somebody in North Idaho. And so there's going to be a world of difference in their attitude and in their how they see things, which is why we always like to do the primary, the first hand, conduct the surveys, do the focus groups, reach out to people through interviews, anything we can to get that information that we need. I keep mentioning surveys. Surveys are without a doubt our number one tool. We use them a lot. And there are some things that you must be able to understand when we're discussing surveys. There are terms that we use, and these terms are not interchangeable. They have very specific meaning. So please make sure that you understand these terms. First, demographic data. That is information that we use to segment our publics. This can be by age, gender, income level, religious affiliation, political affiliation, however we divide it, but we're looking for the demographic data that allows us to say, yes, this is our target demographic. This is who we're looking for. Another thing we look at is psychographic, and psychographic data segments publics according to their values, attitudes, and lifestyles. This is very different from things such as age and gender and are you Democrat or Republican. This is, what are your values? How do you view something? Are you someone who has a lot of money that you can spend freely, or are you a saver, or how do you view life? Psychographic data is very important to us because you don't want to sell laundry detergent to someone who says, I'm only going to use what my mother used, which is what my grandmother used, which is what my great-grandmother used. Getting them to switch is virtually impossible, but you can understand their attitude, and you frequently need to do that so that you can try to pitch to them at some point. Another thing that you need to understand is personal drop-off. This is if you personally deliver a survey. This is not an online survey. This is a survey where you actually take it out to someone, the people who are in the malls, who, especially at Christmas, who when they're out there and they stop you and they ask you a few quick questions. That's a personal drop-off. That's personally delivering the survey and asking the person to fill it out. Another thing is confidence level. Confidence level is the percentage of certainty that the results of the survey will be the same if replicated. Generally, what we see is we'll see a confidence level of plus minus 2.5 or plus minus 5, which means every 2.5 times or every 5 times you see the survey or the survey is answered, it's going to be answered about the same way. Confidence level is something else we'll talk about a little bit later, but it's something that you need to be aware of this term. And finally, you need to know probability sampling, and that is every individual in the population has an equal chance of being selected. There are many, many, many different types of survey sampling. Probability sampling is that everyone in that population base that you're reaching out to has an equal chance of being selected. Let's go to the next slide and we'll continue talking about this. More about surveys include non-probability sampling. Non-probability sampling is whoever's available. Frequently, there's a thing called a snowball sample. Snowball sample means that you go to the people closest to you and gather data. Like you pack a snowball, you just grab the closest snow to you. A snowball sample is non-probability sampling. It's whoever's closest to you, physically within your immediate area that you can reach out to and get information from. Another thing that we need to look at is sampling error. That's the margin of error, possibility of the percentage of variation from the whole population. Plus minus 2.5% means that if, let's say it's a presidential poll and the candidates are 49 and 49, excuse me, it could actually mean that that one person might be 51%, the other person might be 48%. There's, that sampling, there's that level of error that might be in there, that it can't be 100% according to what you're seeing. Then there's non-sampling error. This is human error in selecting the sample or in designing and implementing the survey. Human error is a very common thing. We all do it, especially when we first start creating surveys. It is something that it just takes experience to get beyond. Making sure that you've got the right people, making sure that you've actually written your survey correctly. And again, we'll talk about writing surveys later on, but I want you to understand that don't worry about making a mistake. We all make mistakes in them, and it is a learning process. There is a thing known as purposive sampling. It's always hard for me to say that. That's identifying and sampling opinion leaders to determine the attitudes and behaviors. You always want to get opinion leaders, local leaders who are considered important people in your community. Here on the Palouse, it would be the mayors of Moscow and Pullman, city council members. It would be people who are community leaders, such as city council members. It would also be local business owners who are well known, such as Schweitzer Engineering, or people from the University of Idaho or Washington State. Identifying those people that other people listen to is basically what this type of sampling is. And there's also stratified sampling. This is selecting a sample to ensure a proportionate representation of segmentation within the population. Okay, that's a whole big mouthful. Basically what it's saying, if you have a list of 600 people to survey, and you say we're going to survey every third person, and you go through and you go 1, 2, 3, sample that person, 1, 2, 3, sample that person, 1, 2, 3, sample that person. That is stratified sampling. That is making sure you get a swath across the group, but it is not, saying that you're going to interview every single person or sample every single person, just that it's a proportionate representation. And finally, there's a thing called a panel study. Panel study is a specific group who has repeatedly sampled to track opinion changes. We see this a lot, especially in politics, but in StratComm, we use this type of panel study to make sure that we are staying on an even keel. We generally have a small group of people that we're always going back and asking them their opinion to make sure that we're not getting too far off base with some of our materials. So this is the basics of research. There's another PowerPoint coming up which goes a little bit more into a different type of research, making sure what to ask. And so I want you to listen to that one next.